Eric, where are you?
Where am I? Here, I'll give a little view here. Get it.
Where are you and why are you there? How about that?
Boy, the camera's not getting the color density. This is near San Luis Obispo, Ipomo. We're here for Sukkot in California. Not far from Pismo Beach.
Is that a hotel or is that somebody's house?
It's a house, actually.
It's nice.
And just a nice little bit of California countryside. There's orchards and groves out in the distance and vineyards. I don't know if you can see the details, but beautiful spot. Anyway, so
I'm going to pray, and then Eric's going to get into talking about what's behind me, only a bigger version of it, and it'll definitely be on the screen during the teaching. So, Father, thank you for Sukkot. Thank you for your Moedim. Thank you for remembering your covenant with us, that we can remember your covenant as well. Thank you for waking all these people up, Father, and just bless Israel and remember us. Remember us, remember us. In Yahuwah's name I pray. Amen.
hallelujah. So we have this picture on the graphic section of Eriktology.net. Kurt can make a link there, where if you go to Eriktology.net on the internet and punch in graphics, this is the first picture that comes up, and it's simply called the array. And so I made a deck of cards, which only a few people have it. I didn't get a whole lot of them made. But the point is, I laid out what the deck of cards is instead of suits, like you'll have in what's called a standard deck of playing cards, where you have hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades, instead of those four suits, every suit is a font of the Hebrew alphabet. So you have modern flame letters, modern cursive letters, paleo letters. The idea of making a deck of cards was so that you can become familiar in that if somebody says, oh, you should learn Swahili, it's like nothing's written in Swahili unless you're maybe a missionary or you're conducting a commercial business enterprise with the people over in the middle of Africa. But in our normal environment, in our culture, we have nothing written in that language. So you as an individual would have to put a whole lot of effort towards finding books or writing things yourself, or it's just not useful. It's not common. So if I was to suggest, hey, we should read Paleo Hebrew, nothing's written in Paleo Hebrew. Well, I can write things in Paleo Hebrew, which is one reason I started making stickers, little graphics with Hebrew words, like the Kadosh Yahweh that was written on the headband of the high priest. So nobody knows what it says, but if you know what it says, every time your eyes see that bumper sticker, you'd think, oh, that means, as it's translated, holiness unto the Lord, and the headband of the high priest. Only that's really not what it says. That's what it's been translated to say to somebody who speaks modern English. Kadosh Yahweh simply says Kadosh Yahweh. Doesn't say holiness to the Lord. It might actually mean betrothed to Yahweh, or sanctified by Yahuwah, or I am set apart unto Yahweh. And it could also mean a few other things. But the point is, when you look at Hebrew words, anywhere in the world, you're probably going to see a version of modern flame letters. And you can learn what those mean, but you don't, unless you speak Hebrew, unless you were raised speaking Hebrew or learned it in your synagogue that you were going to, there's really no reason to give it a regard because it's not in use. Now, if you go to Israel, there's Hebrew letters all over the place. And so then, well, learn how to speak Hebrew or read Hebrew so that you can read street names. You can read a menu at a restaurant. There was an occasion in 2010, I was in Jerusalem and I happened to go up to the Wailing Wall. It was middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning or something. And I picked up a prayer book that was right there by the wall. I think there was only 1 or 2 other people in that whole area. And it struck my heart that I could actually open up that prayer book, read those words, and I knew what it was saying. And I could align my inner being with the sentiment expressed by those words, standing right there in front of the Wailing Wall at the hotel. And it was, to me, it was a deep, profound occasion because intellectually, I could read those words, and I couldn't read very well, but I could read those words. I knew what they were saying, and I could say, yes, amen, I agree. I can, my inner being resonates with the sentiment, with the verbalized cry, the notion that those letters were expressing, that otherwise you just pick it up and it's like a bunch of scribbles on a page. You can't associate, you know, it's like, oh, well, somebody's saying something, it must be significant because here's this book sitting at the wall. But there's something about literacy which is just incredible. If you were living in a previous era or maybe another country other than the USA where you're not allowed to read or you're not encouraged to read, you could still get, in fact, I presently today, this 2021, I have a few friends who are totally illiterate. They can't read and they can barely write. And if they do write, they're sounding out words, and it's almost humorous the way they spell words. Not funny making fun of them, it's just funny if you know how to read and write and you see how crazy the phonetics of English are when people are attempting, but it's almost pitiful, pathetic, it's almost shameful that why didn't they learn how to read and write? Other things were more important. And they could get by, you know, they're in their 60s now, and it's like, yeah, they've gotten by in life. It didn't have to, you don't have to learn how to read and write. If you don't read the Bible, it's not like, well, if you don't read the Bible, you're going to burn in hell. I mean, gosh, you know, Mark was telling us a few weeks ago that for most of his entire life, for 50 years of his life, he was taught, do not read the Bible or you'll burn in hell. Don't try to read the Bible. If you try to read the Bible, you'll be tormented with insanity and you'll probably end up in hell. And as we mentioned on a previous video, I read a book, forget the title of it, but it was saying anybody, literally that's what this book was saying right in the beginning, and then it went on to elaborate why, and it was a pretty thick book, probably 500 pages or something. It was saying anybody who tries to translate Hebrew and Greek words, if you study dictionaries and lexicons and you try to translate, you will be profaned. You will either go insane or you'll end up in hell. That's what they were saying. You'll fall from your faith. You'll lose bearings of the truth. So, and I say that with a certain somber regard, saying for me to make it my eye and noon hay, my business, my intent, my burden to help anybody with an interest in comprehending what a Hebrew word means, or to learn how to read Hebrew, or to at least, if you can't read and flow through to say, oh, I know what the author of this sentence was trying to communicate, at least if you can look at the letters and say, oh, I know what the pictographic value of those letters are. I know that the original Hebrew language, every letter was a picture, like hieroglyphics, like Egyptian hieroglyphics. At least that's helpful. It's like, oh no, according to Miles Jones, who wrote the book, The Writing of God, not only is it not helpful, it's idolatry, and you're going to end up burning in hell if you try to read the Paleo-Hebrew letters. Literally, that's what he says. He doesn't say if you try to read Paleo-Hebrew letters, you're going to burn in hell, but he says the Almighty himself, when he wrote with his finger on the tables of stone, he extracted pictographic value from the letters, because if a letter is a picture, it's a carved image, and the second of the 10 Commandments says, do not make any carved images. So Miles Jones, in his book, The Writing of God, says the Almighty wouldn't break his own commandment, so when he wrote with his finger letters on stone, he was not carving images. So therefore, he extracted or eradicated pictographic value from the letters by his own action of writing the letters on the tables of stone. It's logic. I disagree. Well, if reading Paleo-Hebrew letters as pictures is pure idolatry, and if you persist in idolatry and encourage idolatry, you're going to end up burning in hell. That's what I'm saying. It's logic. What you believe, driving what you do, how you behave, will determine your eternal destiny. So according to Miles Jones, this whole study of what I'm saying is called Eriktology is heathen, is infidel, is leading people straight to the lake of eternal fire. Why would we do that? Are we insane? Are we stupid? Are we just demonically, satanically bad people? These are all very serious questions, and it has specifically to do with this exact study we're doing. This is really serious stuff. And so numerous times, almost every week, I've said, hey, look, when you read these Hebrew words in the English translation, it seems to be saying a certain thing, a certain narrative, a certain storyline. But when you look at the Hebrew words and you look at the definition of the Hebrew words, and if you look at what the letters are saying, it's almost like thousands of times through the scripture, it seems to be saying one of these days people will come back to the real meanings of the words, seeking the face of Yahweh as the Elohim of Israel, and they will realize that the words are all telling us, if we listen to his voice, if we read his words, if we learn his language, it pleases his heart, it will help us to teshuvah, to repent, to return to his ways, and it will be the conduit of restoring the kingdom to Israel and restoring the favor of our Elohim to us and us to him, where it says numerous times, Yahweh says, I'm going to be your Elohim and you're going to be my people. That's his wish list, bucket list. It's his fantasy dream of projecting one of these days it's going to happen where my people will listen to my voice, Shema Israel. And then I'm going to be their Elohim, and they're going to be my people because they'll know my heart, because they'll be hearing my words, because the words themselves are the conduit of communication, heart to heart, face to face. And I think, or I see in the Hebrew words, at the Paleo-Hebrew level of understanding that the letters are pictures, and that the letters are actually not just pictures. That's only one level, but they're actually, every letter is like a bus full of people. Every letter is a carrier full of ideas. Like every person has ideas. A bus carries a bunch of people with a bunch of different ideas. Every letter is a vehicle like a bus carrying a whole bunch of things that all have to do with that letter. So when you write a word, you're looking at a bunch of different buses full of a whole bunch of different people. Well, each person is an idea, so every different way of reading a letter is like a different person inside the bus. I'm trying to use metaphors here, but that's the way the language works. That's what I found about the Paleo-Hebrew. That's the way the language is built. And then to say, well, Yahweh built the language himself. He's the guy that designed all this. So if Miles Jones says, according to my logic, Yahweh, when he wrote with his finger, he wouldn't betray his own commandment to not have carved images. Therefore, well, he's just using his own logic. That doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean he's an idiot or a liar. It just means that's like having a lawyer argue a case in court. Here's the evidence. Here's the facts. Now we're trying to determine the reality. That's what court law does. And so for us to have this conversation, me arguing, combating against the likes of Miles Jones and Michael Brown and Michael Heiser, those are the three top names of people holding that view. And they've expressed it quite publicly on various conferences and internet. So for me to say, okay, I'll challenge them on the internet. I'll challenge them face to face if they want. Let them give me a call. But what I'm saying is that I'm absolutely convinced that to comprehend the Paleo letters as pictures is kadosh LeYahweh. It's sacred. It's his personal design. It's not a sacrilege. It is not idolatry. As a matter of fact, I think that understanding the pictographic value of the Paleo-Hebrew letters is the vehicle that will take us directly to his throne room, you might say. It's kadosh Kadoshim. That's called in English Holy of Holies, or the absolute most sacred. I really do believe that reading the Paleo-Hebrew letters at the essence level, they're not just letters. Oh, but being just letters is one of the levels. Now, when I say levels, I could say dimensions, or I could say aspects. I'm trying to find English words by which to help us understand what's going on in these letters. So, in making the deck of playing cards, instead of saying, okay, the only place to read Hebrew is if you go to Israel, in which case you'll see street names and newspapers and scripture written in Hebrew. Well, you could go on the internet and turn on Bible Gateway or Bible Hub, or you'll punch up and they'll show you an English verse, and then they'll show you the modern Hebrew. And even if someone wrote Paleo Hebrew, gosh, there's at least a half a dozen, if not a couple dozen, scripts of Paleo Hebrew. Just so you know, somebody with the initials TL just wrote up a statement, and I can't read it. It's on there. It only comes up on my screen so fast in a few seconds, and I'm trying to finish the sentence by my time my eyes go there. I can't see it. So the only way that I'm going to be able to respond to what you're writing, I'd have to pull up the chat on the side, but then it's a total distraction from what I'm trying to say. So I'm not trying to ignore you, but I will come to a pause point, and feel free to bring to my attention your statement or question, because otherwise it's impossible for me to address it. Sorry about that. You're welcome to ask questions. People are, but then because my computer can't open, I have to step back here and I can't see if somebody's hand is raised, then Kurt's going to have to bring it to my attention. Just so you know, that's just the format of what we're talking about. But anyway, I'll continue. The idea of making the playing cards with these different fonts is so that people can make it present tense useful. In other words, if one way to use the deck of playing cards is to say, hey, I'm going to open up the Bible Hub and read my favorite Bible verse, Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay, open up the Bible, find the verse you want, and then go to the internet, the Bible Gateway or whatever it is, Blue Letter Bible or whatever it might be, look at it in Hebrew, and then open up the deck of cards and find the letters that spell those words and lay them out in a row in front of you on the floor or on the table. There, you're using the deck of cards. What it means is that you're taking the time, you're spending minutes dwelling on, hey, how do you spell that word? The Lord is my shepherd. Really? How do you spell Lord? L-O-R-D. What are the phonetics in Hebrew? Lamed, Vav, Resh, Dalet. But then you look over in the Hebrew and those letters aren't there. It's like, why not? Oh, it says it's Hashem. There you go. Well, that would be the letter Hey and then Shin Mem. And you look in the Hebrew and, hey, that's not there either. Oh, it must be Adonai. How do you spell Adonai? Aleph, Dalet, Vav, Nun, Yod. Okay, the Lord is, or Adonai is my shepherd. So then you look in the Hebrew and, those letters aren't there either. What the heck is going on? And you realize, oh, it's Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Well, why isn't that transliterated into English? Because that's not what we're given. So if you then have this deck of cards and you want to find, or you could use anybody's flashcards, whatever, you could make your own cards. But then you have to find in this, there's like 300 cards in this deck. And so then you have the deck pushed all around the tabletop. And now you've got to locate for yourself, gee, where's a Yod, where's a Vav? And so because there's different fonts, my intent was making this deck was so that people could say, hey, what if, how would you spell it using modern flame letters? How about modern cursive letters? That's like the script, like handwriting that they use in modern Israel quite often. Or paleo or pictograph, or what's the number value? And so there's all these different ways to regard the letters. And so that's what the intent, besides that there's a couple of the games, that's another matter, but that's the intent of making the deck of cards. And so by laying these various fonts out as an array, which means, okay, there's, and Kurt has the picture here, the very top row is this thing called the Mishkan pattern. And then the next row is you might say the Eriktology font, which is the paleo letters in white with different colored backgrounds. And there's a reason for that, which I could explain. But the next row is some little sketch of pictures. The next row is numbers. And then the next row is the modern flame letters, and it's got a flame-like background. The next row is modern cursive, which is drawn, I think of ripples in water when I see the modern Hebrew. And for years, I couldn't wrap my mind around the modern Hebrew cursive writing at all. They're just like these weird lines, and it's like, whatever. But when you're over in Israel, a lot of things are written in modern Hebrew. And I've seen people on the internet write with the modern cursive, not the modern, what's called the block letters or the flame letters. And so it's a legitimate common use font. And you might say, I don't want to learn that, or I don't like it, or I don't think I need to learn that. And I'm not suggesting that you should, but what I'm saying is if you want to be literate, it would be helpful, just because a lot of people who speak Hebrew use that letter style. And then you can say, well, what's the difference between the flame, the cursive, the ripply water looking, the paleo? Which one is more sacred? It's like, oh, I'm not saying any of them are sacred. The meaning of the letters, I'm saying, is sacred. Kadosh LeYahweh. And the paleo letters, I think, like a bus, pick up your consciousness and drive it towards Yahuwah, towards him. Do you ever reach him? Well, he was within us. He's not out there. I'm using metaphors of expression. Something about his words and being able to read his words, a certain degree of literacy, I think, is what he told us. So when he said, and I could give you a whole list of Bible verses, he told Moshe at one point to take a big rock and put plaster on it and write the words in the plaster. And he said, make them well clarified. Now, does that mean write them cleanly? Maybe. Does it mean explain what you've written to the people? It might mean that. There's Nehemiah chapter 8. It was the first day of the 7th month, which is actually Yom Teruah. The Israelites had come back from the captivity in Babylon after, it was during the days of the Empire of Media Persia. Cyrus had funded and sent a military escort with Nehemiah, Ezra came with them, to Jerusalem and told them to rebuild it. And they were in the process of rebuilding their houses, the infrastructure of the urban development, the temple, and they had made some great progress. And so this was the day of Yom Teruah. So Nehemiah said, hey, let's grab Ezra and have him bring the Torah scroll and read it. And he started reading it, and the people started crying and wailing and regretting with deep remorse in their heart. And it was a day of woe. And Nehemiah said, this is not appropriate. But they were saying, gosh, we've fallen so far away from our Elohim. We've strayed, we've polluted, we've just ruined everything for so many years. We're so far from where we're supposed to be. And he said, yes, but today we're hearing the Torah, which we've never heard, nor previous generations ever heard. But this should be a day of feasting and rejoicing and great sameach. This is a spectacular day that we get to hear his very words. And so he commanded this great feast, and the people should give gifts to each other, and the people should consider hearing his words to be the supreme event of their life and in the life of the nation. And then that was the first day of the 7th month. 10 days later would have been Yom Kippur, then another 5 days later, the week of Sukkot. So it says they had a celebration greater, it had never been since the days of Joshua. Well, that means David and Solomon never had such a thing. What we are doing by coming back to comprehending the words of Yahweh, I believe, is an equivalent thrill, an equivalent great world-impacting monumental occasion that we can say, not just have a priest read the words to you, but set your eyes on the very words that Yahweh wrote with his finger and say, I get it. I understand what he said. And it's not just, I know that the Lamed is pronounced like the English letter L. Oh, yeah, that's Lamed. Oh, I get it. No, wait a minute. What does Lamed mean? Oh, it means teach and learn and rehearse. But it's spelled Lamed Mem Dalet. And what does that mean? What does Lamed mean? What does Mem mean? What does Dalet mean? What does Lamed Mem mean? What does Mem Dalet mean? And when you put all three together, what does that mean? And what is a Talmud? Oh, that's that thing the Jews write that's superfluous to the Torah. It's like, no, that word Talmud, well, it is that, but it also means taught ones. So Yeshua's disciples were Talmudim. So the Tav is a prefix, Yod Mem is a suffix, and the word Lamed is right there in the middle. So the Talmud is not a bad word of a bad thing, but that's what we've inherited. So we have to completely learn how to not just erase what we've learned, but readjust what we've learned. And how do you do that? Looking at the letters. So the purpose of laying out all the pictures of the different fonts in this thing called the array is to show that there's different, call them dimensions, or different ways or different levels of knowing, of comprehending what a letter is. So the way this is laid out is this thing called the Mishkan pattern up in the top. And we were having a conversation before we started recording where, hey, what is that Mishkan pattern? So Kurt's going to put a tag underneath the video where we did, what'd you say, back in April or back in February or something, we did one of these Skype calls just on explaining the Mishkan pattern. And as I mentioned, Eriktology.net, this thing back in 2006 called So What? I was explaining the Mishkan pattern. Mountain Air 7 YouTube's explaining the Mishkan pattern. I'll do it again. The idea that Yahuwah, let's just say it was before he was creating the universe. Let's wind back time to a time when there was no time. Time hadn't been invented yet. What was going on in the universe? Well, there wasn't even a universe. There was no time and there was no space. This was a time in the heavens when, let's just call him the Almighty. That word Almighty is in Hebrew Shaddai. But he didn't have a name because nothing had been invented yet. What existed before anything was invented? Well, to invent something means that you have to have matter. Well, matter is a substance, and matter exists in a space. And once it exists, now you have time, because it was, what did you do before? What's going to happen later? So before there was time and space and matter, what was there? We don't know. We don't even know how to describe that other than say, in the heavenlies. Okay. So every time you try to describe something Hebrew with English words, you get trapped in a little box like a rat in a maze, that you have to try to explain that you're in a maze. And the only way you can describe to the rat that he's in the maze is by having a view, a perspective outside the maze, looking down at the maze and saying, let me describe where you are and how you're trapped. But when the rat's consciousness is designed by the Creator to only perceive inside the maze, he can never fathom that there is an outside to the maze. That's like us being stuck in the universe of time and space as creatures with a body composed of matter and a consciousness locked inside that body, inside that universe that we can't get out of. And so last week, who was it? Well, anyway, it doesn't matter, Charles or Randall, somebody was saying, hey, Deuteronomy 29:28 says, the things that are unknown, well, that's unto Elohim. That's his business. That's outside the box. But the things that are revealed to us, anything inside the box that we can fathom, that we can comprehend, that we can imagine, that we can bump into, that we can address, that's for us and our children in order to regard, hear, obey, give attention to, make it our burden, our ayin nun hey. That's that. I keep mentioning that word because that's the command for Yom Kippur, that it's translated afflict yourself. And it's like ayin nun hey means afflict yourself. Does that mean fast? It also means sing. It also means answer. It also means respond. It also means make it your burden, make it your attention, the object of your attention. Concern yourself with it on Yom Kippur. Well, don't eat anything. Don't drink anything. Oh, now I've done it. It's like, no. Gosh, yeah, I mean, if you eat or drink, that's a different matter, but that's the way it's translated. So what I'm saying is anything that we attend to because of what's been revealed, according to Deuteronomy 29:28, is for us and our children to regard all the words of the Torah. Okay, that's what that verse says. So what I'm saying is, if we go back in time, before there was time, before there was a universe, before there was, go back to John 1:1, in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word. Well, what about before the Word? Because in the beginning means time now starts. Okay, well, go back before there was time. Go back to in the beginning when there was no Word. So how did our Elohim, see, his name wasn't even Yahuwah, because the word Yahuwah is spelled with letters. You have to have a word. You have to have letters of an alphabet before you can spell a word. So why did he choose those 4 letters to be his name? We have to go back before that. And it's like, oh, gosh. Now this is all imagination. This is all pretend. But logically, if I can wind back my mind trying to observe time, because he built my mind. He created human consciousness. And according to John 1:1, everything that was made as a projection through this word. And as we've said numerous times before, that the word of John 1:1 is the Hebrew alphabet. That's a postulation, a hypothesis. It's a matter of, you might say, a philosophical argument. So the whole Eriktology premise is Elohim created the Hebrew alphabet, which is the word of John 1:1. And then that Hebrew alphabet was used as this lens through which he projected his ideas, and then the physical universe became manifest as physical time and space and matter. And then that his Yahuwah, well, didn't even have a name yet, the creator, the Elohim, projected his personal identity somehow through this alphabet and became a human being that we call Yahusha. Some people call him Jesus. Some people call him Esu. That guy that walked the face of the earth 2,000 years ago was a projection of that word. But before that word was determined. Now, if I say he created the word, then people say, what? Are you telling me Jesus was a created being? Jesus is a created being? No, that's not what I said. But the Elohim, let's say, for lack of any better description, somehow determined to compose himself in a format of a word composed of 22 letters. When I say compose, that's the work of an artist, musician, an author. He, the Elohim, somehow determined to express himself, verbalize himself, self-identity. That's autograph. That's self-expression, self-referential, a projection of your inner state of mind, of intent, of purpose. So you write, you create a picture, you play a song, you whistle a tune, all that's self-expression. So that's what he did by making the alphabet. But before he made the alphabet, he had to have an index, a skeleton, rhyme or reason, you might say, for how should the alphabet be designed? How many letters? Why? Humans who study the ancient Semitic alphabet will tell you nobody knows when, why, how, what purpose was the most ancient alphabet. In fact, just the other day, I saw a book published by kind of a magazine, special magazine, published by National Geographic, 100 of the most influential inventions on the planet throughout history. First one was inventing fire. Next one was discovering how to make fire. Next one was the wheel. One of them was making the pyramids. One of them was the Great Wall of China. ATM machines. But one of the earliest ones was making the alphabet, the phonetic alphabet. And it says the original alphabet, composed of 22 letters, it says right there, National Geographic. Nobody, to this day, nobody knows who made it or why. But the original alphabet of 22 letters became the basis for developing the Semitic, the Arabic, the Latin, the Greek, modern languages. It tells you right there. Imagine that. They have no idea why or when. What's the rational positioning of the letters organized? We call that word indexing. They don't know. They, the world's greatest scholars, have no idea. Well, what I'm saying is it goes back to that time before there was time when Elohim actually invented the first word of John 1:1. And when he had a reason for the design, for the pattern, for the sequence of the letters, even though modern linguistic scientists, call them linguistic anthropology, you could say, they have said, we don't know any reason for the sequence of letters. They pretty much all agree that the letters are in a certain, if you use Greek, it's aleph, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. In Hebrew, it's aleph, bet, gimel, dalet, hey, vav, zayin. And in English, it's A, B, C, D. Well, they're all the same. They're all synchronized exactly the same in the exact same order. Why? Well, people say, well, somebody way back when just took a collection of symbols. You know, if I stand here and look out and there's this farming community in front of me, I could say, well, there's a palm tree, there's a building, there's an automobile. Okay, those will be symbols of 3 of the letters. Why? Well, just because it's useful to the culture. That's what they think is the basis for the Hebrew alphabet. Just a fish skeleton, a fish hook, a camel, a door, an ox, whatever. Nobody knows why. What I'm suggesting is it's the Mishkan pattern, very intentional, that the Almighty himself wanted to communicate a message. And he decided to communicate the message of self-referential self-expression. So it's an autobiography. I'm saying that the Hebrew alphabet is an autobiography written in his own hand concerning the revelation of who he is and where his heart's at. And because he made humanity's through this alphabet, then humanity's consciousness is also particularly fit to that same pattern. And everything in creation is a developed aspect of that exact same pattern. Therefore, if we look at creation, physics and mathematics and chemistry are controlled by the Mishkan pattern, by the alphabetic sequence. So is human consciousness, of philosophy and psychology and human interactions together, of which you would throw in the realm of sociology. And then even the way that plants fit their cellular structure together, which would be different ways of looking at biology. What I'm saying is that they all must be expressions of the Hebrew alphabet. And the Hebrew alphabet, according to Exodus 25, it says he brought Moshe up into the mountain and said, I'm going to show you this pattern of the Mishkan, and you're supposed to make the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle, translated in English, is exactly according to the pattern. So for me to say Mishkan pattern, that's a quote right out of Exodus, I think it's 25:9, 2 words, Tabanit Mishkan. That's just the pattern. That's just the look, the arrangement, the schematic engineered drawing of the tabernacle. Oh no, but it's much more. Tabanit, Tav, Bet Nun Yod, Tav, is the word pattern. But the word Bet Nun Yod, Beni, means my son. And the letter Tav is a sign of a sign. It's the symbol that means a mark. It also is a mark, you might say, of somebody in agreement in covenant. So there's so many different ways to read this. We could go on and on for many hours. I'm going to try to keep this as quick as possible. But what I'm saying is that if the letter Tav is you make a mark, here, sign your name, X. We still do that even today in modern America. X, sign your name. You agree to the terms of this contract. Okay, so Tabanit, my son, Benny, is in between 2 letters Tav, which means, oh, there's 2 people involved in a contract, and my son will be the mediator. Well, that's Yahusha or Yeshua, however you want to say his name. He's the mediator. The priest, the Kohen, is the mediator between the people and Elohim. Israel is supposed to be the Kohanim to the world, the mediator, the one who well clarifies these words between what did Elohim say and what does humans think when they bump into their problems of interaction with each other. And I'm saying I could go on and on elaborating on what this is, but the Mishkan pattern then is the fact that Elohim said, I'm going to speak in 7 iterations. And those 7 iterations are in a particular sequence. And so when he made the universe in 7 days, it was a model of that same sequence. When he gave us 7 Moedim, it was a model of the same sequence. When he gave us the Mishkan, 7 pieces to that building project, it was a statement. What I'm saying is that there's a communication within the pattern. And if we just see the pattern as just like, oh, that's just the form, you know, there's a house, that's a box, and there's a driveway, and then there's a car, and whatever. No, it's very particular. There's a communication in the pattern. And so I've found over 500 times in scripture that pattern. Daniel 9:24-27 is one place where the pattern is, where he says 77s have been allotted or assigned to your people. And he goes on to describe it. We've talked about that before. But what I'm saying is that in the 7-day sequence is the pattern of Genesis 1. In the Moedim, that sequence is the same pattern. So for him to determine the pattern first, that's right up at top, which is the reason why the cards have clouds in the background. It's kind of like up in the heavenlies. Okay, so he first makes the pattern because he's communicating a message, and the message is not only his own identity, but his own heart. And what's his heart? The chief matter of his heart is to have a people who walk in his ways and relate to him heart to heart instead of rebelling against everything he ever said that he wanted out of them, which is not do this, do that, but love me and walk in my ways. Okay, so that's the message of the Mishkan pattern. This is me. I'm making you to exist as human beings living in a universe, on a planet, on a world. And I want you to interact with each other and interact with me, walking in my ways of righteousness, goodness, truth, kindness. Okay, that's the message. And since we have a mortal existence here, then after we die, there's the shot at the opportunity that we can live as an immortal existence with him in another project that he's not even going to disclose what it is. Okay, that's the message embedded within the Mishkan pattern. Okay, so if he determines the Mishkan pattern first, then he breaks it down into 22 letters. Well, if the Mishkan pattern is 7 basic matters, why should he choose 22? I don't know, he just did. But if you divide 22 by 7, you end up with 3.14, which happens to be the number pi. Of course, pi has an infinite, literally an infinite set of numbers zeroing in on the true value of pi. But we just say in mathematics, I call it 3.14. 3 and 1/10 and 4/100, and then an infinite number is the number pi. What a mind-blowing concept, mathematics. But what I'm saying is basically 22 divided by 7. Well, the point of that is to say that if he created the universe out of letters, then mathematics are an expression of the letters. And if you look at that array, the very top is the Mishkan pattern. And then you look at the next set, and it's the paleo letters in white. Why? Well, each letter is a pure consciousness from Elohim. Soon as we try to figure out what it is, it's no longer kadosh. Now it's wrapped in human consciousness. So the reason why there's white letters is because it suggests the concept that says, if we really knew what these letters meant, they're so brilliant, like Moshe's face shining, we couldn't behold them. If we really knew what he meant when he invented each one of these letters, it's so brilliant, the human mind isn't even designed to engage it. The closest we can come, remember there's that story Moshe said to Elohim, will you please show me your glory? I mean, just let me see your glory, whatever that means. I don't know, but can I see your glory? And Elohim said, no man, no human can see my face and live. But he stuck him in a crevice in the rock, put his hand over Moshe. He passed by and he spoke and he gave him words explaining himself. And he took his hand off and let Moshe see his backside. So it's a true event, but it's a metaphorical picture that says we can't see him coming. We can't know what he's going to do before he does it. But after he does it, we can look at history and say, oh, look, he did this and he did that. He gives us words of prophecy, but we can most clearly see what he did in back, looking in history. So I take that to mean, because he says, don't go seeking necromancers and prophets and people that read tea leaves and clouds and whatever to try to figure out what's going to happen in the future. We have what he gave us. I'm going to do this and do that, and this is who I am, and this is who you are, and you better do this way and not that way. And it's like, okay, just live that way. Quit trying to figure out, does everybody have a word of prophecy that we can? It's like, yeah, the prophecy is listen to what he said, or you're getting in big trouble. Do what he said, or else it'll go bad for you. Walk in his ways, and he'll bless us, and we'll be his people. That's about the only prophecy we get. Anything more from that starts looking like sorcery and witchcraft, but that's another matter. What I'm saying is, it'll play into the flame letters here in a minute, but what I'm saying is that to have the white letters with a colored background, the colored background is set in a sort of spectral array, and it gives us reference of placement. Because what I found in studying the letters is that essentially every letter is in every other letter. It's what we would call holographic. A hologram, there's two words, hologram and holograph. One of the words means it's written by the hand of the author. It's an autobiography, same type of word. The other one means that if you take a hologram, keep forgetting which is which. I think it's holographic. If you take a holographic picture, hologram. Anyway, if you take one of those 3D pictures and you have it like on a piece of glass and you break it, if you take a regular picture and you break it, then it'd be like a jigsaw puzzle. Each piece is just a piece of the whole. But with a hologram, you break it, and because of the way it's made, every piece shows you the whole picture. The same way with the language. Every letter is composed of every letter, which means he had to build the entire alphabet all at once. So in his great, omnipotent mind, before he invented, established, placed one letter, he had to have all 22 in sequence order. It's kind of like the idea that how do you create an eyeball? It couldn't evolve because an eyeball has to have the optic nerve key to the brain and the retina and the cornea and the rods and cones and the gelaceous material in between. And it's like, it can't evolve. They say that if you think the world was created with evolution, that's like believing a tornado can hit a junkyard and spin out of it a 747 jet fully loaded with hydraulics and fuel and flying, aimed to a destination out of random chance. It's insane to think that this universe, the planet, or any object in it could have evolved. And scientists somehow have duped millions of people to think that that's the reality. It's pure lunacy. But to believe that this place was intelligently designed means that he had to think up the whole thing piece by piece as a cohesive functioning unit, self-contained, and then make it so all at once, though he did it in 7 phases of Genesis 1. And what I'm saying is that the alphabet must have been obviously created the same way. If the sequence of 22 letters is in every letter, then that's a picture of a wheel within a wheel. That's the way the alphabet is built. So to look at this, now we're going back to the array. Back before there was time and space and matter, the Almighty, the El Shaddai, the El Elyon, the Elohim of Elohims, had this big idea to communicate and express himself, and he put it in the form of 7, a pattern of 7, which is called the Mishkan pattern. And from that, he broke it down into 22 phases, 22 letters. But each letter is composed of all the other letters, and each letter has a place in the sequence that can't ever be moved. And each letter then has its own essence, its own statement, its own identity, but yet its own identity is composed of the group of all the other. It's kind of like the 12 tribes of Israel composing the nation. Kind of the same thing. And then Yeshua himself, being the epitome of expression, is the one person who contains it all. But yet he came as Ben Adam, son of man, the structure of humanity. So that means we also are a composition of all the letters. We also contain it all. We also are composed of each one of these 22 letters. So as we contemplate what does it mean to be a human being, it's in these letters. But if we want to have a pure form expression to look at as a reference, it's Yeshua, Yahusha. That guy, he said, he came as an emissary of his Father in human form, as that word made flesh. Okay, but anybody who doesn't have a regard for the New Testament, or doesn't have a regard, whether you're a Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, if you don't have a regard for the New Testament, even though it's written in English, you miss that consciousness. So part of the letters, part of the regard of the letters is to realize that guy who came and walked the earth is these letters. Human beings, you and me, are these letters. The universe itself is these letters. But also, these letters are pictures, which if you put them in their sequence order, they tell a story, they tell a narrative, which means they can be read to communicate metaphorically like a parable. So these letters are not just statements of meaning, but they can be read in sequence. And then you can compound them together like hieroglyphics to tell a story. And then if you look at the fact that they're numbers, well, the universe, they say that mathematics is the language of the universe, as is music. But music is a series of notes, which are tones, which are vibrations, which all work according to mathematics and physics, which work because of chemistry. So when you realize math and physics and chemistry is all the letters. So in Hebrew, the letters are numbers. So we could say, well, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, but numbers, we could say 2 + 2 = 4. What does that mean? That means Bet plus Bet equals Dalet? Yeah, in a way. But when we look at them as letters, we can't even think that because we don't, because we haven't been told. So all of a sudden, if you realize, no, the letters are numbers. In fact, the letters were first made to invent mathematics and numbers. The letters are numbers. Numbers are letters. Opens up a whole new world when you think of the letters that way. What does that mean? Okay, I'm going to pause here. I heard somebody make a statement. Are we at an hour or?
Yeah.
24.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. For me to say.
Your screen, we're just looking up your nose.
Oh, sorry about that, guys.
Sorry.
I'm on the aspect of the screen. I only see a little slice of me. I see these trees in the background, but it's not even what I'm standing in front of, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I have to fly out there to show you how to do it.
Yeah, sorry. No, but it's on this other mode of the whole screen changed. Anyway, there are my pictures up in the corner. I'll do that. I'll hold this. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the idea that we can think of the letters as something other than letters by which to spell words. The fact that letters spell words is only one dimension. The fact that letters are numbers is a whole nother dimension. And once you realize that, the universe expands in a way that you couldn't even have guessed that it might. And then to say, well, okay, the Hebrew flame letters, what does that mean? Well, in Deuteronomy 33, verse 2, it said he gave them a fiery Torah. Oh, that's the way it's translated. The word is Aleph, Shin, Dalet, Tav. And then you look in the rabbinical commentary on that page, and it says, well, where they get the phrase fiery Torah is that Aleph, Shin means fire, Dalet, Tav doesn't mean Torah, it means pious, orthodox, legal, right. So in that little picture of the Smilodon, I have the letters Dalet and Tav inside the binocular lens, where you see both of them at once, a binocular vision. It's like Ayin Dalet, Ayin Tav, Daniel 12:4, until the time. Everything's a play on words. All these graphics I do is a big play on words. I'm just trying to throw that out real quick. That if you see that Aleph, Shin, Dalet, Tav, which is translated actually as a cascade of water, it's a sloped hill, like, you know, this background out behind me, this hillside, that's Aleph, Shin, Dalet, Tav, a waterfall. But why then do they translate it fiery Torah? Because they want to. Because the translators of Hebrew, the rabbis, know that you can break down words into 2-letter and 3-letter groups. And for anybody to say, hey, you can't do that, that's unfair, they're wrong. The rabbis do it all the time. You can take Hebrew words and break them down into the 1-letter, 2-letter, or 3-letter pairs. You can look at them as numbers. You can look at them as pictographs. You can read them as esoteric communications. You can look at them as vibrations of the universe, which they are. So it's interesting that the modern Hebrew cursive is drawn with lines that look like ripples of water, because that's a way to see the language. And so people who the reason why witches and sorcerers conduct spells is because they take Hebrew letters and or if it's not Hebrew, it's Greek, or it's Nordic runes or Celtic ogams, different language, different letter styles. It's all the same thing. They know that the universe is composed of letters, and if you mess around with the letters and say weird things, that you can make something happen. And Yahweh says, you do that, you guys are in big trouble. You're not my people. You're going to burn in hell. Don't do witchcraft, sorcery, and cast spells. But you can learn how to read Hebrew. That's a sacred thing to do. And then you look down and you see there's, well, so there's the pictographic, each letter means something, you can tell a story, then you look down and you say, oh, why do I have colored letters on stone? Because in Exodus, what is it, 25, it says Moshe wrote all the words of Yahweh. Then it's Exodus, I think it's in 31, where he said Yahweh wrote with his finger on tables of stone. But the word finger is the exact same word. It's ayin zadi bet ayin. And it literally is the exact same word that means color and dye and paint. So colored letters on stone is literally what Yahweh wrote on tables of stone. Okay, we have to take a break. We're at the hour mark.